Thank you for tuning into Love Dripping from the Walls. I'm your host, Elizabeth Ann Cunningham. You're listening to Season 4, Episode 4. On this season, we are talking about the as-lived experience of people who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and LGBTQ. I, along with my fabulous co-host, Jami Smith, will be joined by people sharing their stories. This episode's topic is, if people only knew this, my life would be easier, peaceful, or happier. The goal of this episode and this season is that those people who can relate to these stories feel seen, heard, and that they aren't alone. And that those people who can't fully relate can understand life from different perspectives. In accomplishing both of these things, that we experience a greater connection as people. Did you know that Love Dripping from the Walls now has merch? Go ahead and click down to the episode notes and buy your hats, hoodies, beanies, masks for Love Dripping from the Walls and other Love merch. Also, whenever you buy Love merch, you support organizations around the world. Currently, we are supporting Autism Compassion Africa. So as you shop, you give back. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the episode. So this is episode 4 of our season 4 of Love Dripping from the Walls. And my name is Elizabeth Cunningham. I'm your host. And we have Jami Smith here, my wonderful and fabulous co-host. And we have our wonderful, amazing panelists. I don't know, is that the right word? People that we're talking to today. Our friends. We are one of our friends here. That's also true. All of that is true. Every single one of those things is true. So what the topic of discussion today is, if people only knew blank, like fill in the blank. If people only knew blank, then my life would be easier, happier, more peaceful. Like things would just work out better. If people only knew this about me, or about like people of color in general, or about the LGBTQ world in general, or about the intersectionality of BIPOC and LGBTQ. So for those of you who are joining this episode and you have no idea what we're talking about, I highly recommend that you go back to our pre-season episode where we talk about what this season is about. So without further ado, I would love to pass it over to Jami first, and then my fun question for today. So how it's going to work is that the first time that you speak, you're just going to say your name, a little bit about you, whatever you want people to know about you. And then the fun question of today is, what is your favorite thing that you like to receive as a gift?
Ooh.
And if you don't like gifts, what is your favorite thing that you like to receive, period?
All right. I am Jami Smith. I am so honored to be the co-host for this season of Love Dripping from the Walls. I am a fan of smart ass t-shirts. So today's shirt is sort of sweet, sort of savage. So just want to let y'all know that. Advertise it, but I love, just kind of funky t-shirts. Also, I have a collection and I just love them. So I love receiving those, and if not, I'm a writer. So any kind of like funky notebook or, high level pens or writing instruments, those are my favorites to receive. And yeah, what Elizabeth said about our topic today is really just all about how much we in the BIPOC and LGBTQ community are just like you. But then in some cases, there are some key things that, we have to keep in mind as we go out through our daily lives. And so for you, fearless listener, fearless watcher, fearless fan of this podcast, assuming that you are here because you want to learn, we're going to give you a little bit of truth today, both happy and not so happy truth. But, that's going to be a great topic for us to kind of cover today. So I'm super, super jazzed that we're doing this.
Yeah. I guess that means I'm going next. Was that a pass? Was that a?
Yep, that was a
pass. So, that's like how I do like podcasts and like any kind of digital media these days. Is I'm just like, I'm gonna keep this raw. And like, is this my turn? Okay. Yeah. So my name is Brian A. Prince. I don't even know what I am. I'm an illustrator, artist, sometimes stunt performer, sometimes actor. Trying to push more into that part of my life. Honestly, I feel like there's this fun correlation between like me becoming more comfortable in my sexuality and me like in the past recognizing this like theater kid that never came out, and I'm like, oh shit, let's do that. Like so like I'm like 31 and right, like I'm 31 now, and I'm just having like all of these urges to like sing and dance, and I'm like, oh, okay, this decade's going to be about that. So that's been kind of fun.
Yes.
Thank you. And so to answer the question, what do I like to receive as a gift? It's funny, like I'm definitely not like, gifts definitely isn't my highest love language. I think it's my lowest. But in that way, like the thing that I like the most as a gift is just complete undivided conversational attention. Like, you know, just like someone sitting down with me, there's no phone, there's eye contact, and we are like passing a ball of conversation. Like it's not just me talking, it's not just them talking, it's just like boom, 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 boom. And like after that, I feel like I'm good. I don't need anything else in the world. So that's definitely like the greatest gift that anyone can give me. Yeah, so that's who I am. I can't remember if I'm supposed to go off the main question or if I should pass it for another introduction.
Well, I'll go ahead and go, and then we can get all the introductions out of the way.
Yeah.
So I'm Paul Anthony Martinez. I am actually a Zumba instructor and a wellness coach. And in honor of Christmas, which is right around the corner, one of the things that I really love is kind of like a family tradition. I love getting ornaments. So every year I get an ornament. This year I bought myself an ornament. So that's something that I really love getting.
Okay. Oh, that's so sweet. I love little traditions like that. That makes me happy.
It's funny that you mentioned Christmas because I think like as a kid, I was like, yeah, the presents. And now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, we're going to sit out at the table and talk. And that's like clearly a difference.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny because my ornaments, there's like a kind of like a transition. Like I started off like at one point I have an ornament of like Pauly D from Jersey Shore and then it goes into like I have an ornament of a high heel. Like,
that's so fun. Oh, I love that.
You're so fabulous.
I know. It's Paul's world. We're just trying to catch up. You know,
it's true.
Right. Elizabeth, did you answer the question?
Oh, no, I didn't answer my own question. Thanks, Jamie. I'm totally an acts of service person. And so if your gift to me is like really useful, anything that's useful, just like if I love books, books are useful, knowledge is useful. I love knowledge and learning and growth. Obviously, that's why I have this podcast. So if somebody gives me a book, if someone comes over and is just like, hey, I'm just going to clean your kitchen. I'm just like, oh my God, really? That's amazing.
I make note taken.
I know, right?
That's so funny. Yeah.
Or if like, or like I had this gift that my grandmother died several years ago, and I didn't have enough money to get home to the funeral. And one of the guys that I was dating at the time, spoiler alert, I'm polyamorous for anyone this is your first time here. But one of the guys that I was dating at the time Venmo'd me $700 to go home for my grandmother's funeral. And that's probably one of the greatest gifts that anybody has like ever given me. I mean, obviously already I was crying because my grandmother had died, but like, it was just like, it was like tears of sadness. And now it's like tears of happiness. And I was just like, you're so amazing. I'm never going to be able to pay you back. And he was like, that's not what this is. Okay.
Right.
Go home and be with your family.
That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping into the question, I guess if people only knew blank, my life would be easier. I've been thinking about this all morning, and it's really difficult. Or I'm having a difficult time with this one, to be honest, because I don't know. Like, it's just like there's a lot of things that I like want people to know. I think, but I don't know if it would make it easier either. Like the first thing that comes to mind for me, or the first thing that came to mind this morning when I was thinking about it in like the shower, was like nobody knows what the fuck they're doing.
Right.
Like nobody. Like none of us do And the most frustrating ones are the people that think they do.
Mhm.
Because then they're like pushing, they're like, I know. And you're like, you don't.
Right.
I don't, you don't. None of us do. We're doing our best, and we like have ideas, and things work for me that won't work for you, and vice versa. But like, we're all figuring it out along the way, I think.
Mhm.
And obviously, this is my opinion because I don't know. So I think like in terms of like both like race and like sexuality, I think the things that are frustrating for me is when someone from any side comes along and is like, "Oh, here's what you do," and I'm like, "No,
Right.
don't please," like because I don't know if that's true. Like I obviously like I'm taking in advice everywhere I can, but I don't know. That's this thing that probably comes up for me initially. It's just like no one knows. I'm doing my best to figure things out that work for me, and I'm learning a lot.
Mhm.
Like a lot. Like I have learned more like in terms of like self-study, both in terms of like racial trauma, like sexuality, just like psychology and everything else. Like I have learned more in the last year than I did in any of my years of schooling.
Mhm.
And it's tough because it's just so much information and so many things to learn and just like I don't know.
Mhm.
So, you know.
To piggyback off of what you said, I mean, like what comes up for me, like one thing, because I've been thinking about it too, and it kind of goes back to another topic that we talked about, and when we talked about people putting us in a box.
Mhm.
And it kind of goes back to what you were saying is that, you know, we're not in a box. We're all still trying to figure it out, and we're not all the same. So for people to assume that gay guys are all supposed to be a certain way, or lesbians are supposed to be all a certain way, or polyamorous, that, you know, that's just not true.
Yeah.
We all have our own self-expression. We all have the way we want to express ourselves, or the way we want to show love, or the way we want to live our life. So it does get kind of frustrating when people are like, oh, well, you're gay. Shouldn't you, you know, be in shape, or shouldn't you be in a certain way? And I'm like, no, this is me.
Yeah, I'm who I am. Like, accept and leave.
And I think that is the most important part of, you know, of kind of learning, as Brian, you were saying, you know, learning that even if you did think those things, that, you know, gay people are a certain way, or, you know, Black people or women or whatever are a certain way, knowing that it's okay for you to be wrong. And once you're wrong, it's okay for you to change that mindset, you know,
Yes.
to come out and say, well, hey, I used to be like that, but here's how I am now. And that that is the basis of living. That is the basis of evolving. You know, when you know better, you do better. So do better. You know, so
Yeah.
it's one of those things, you know, and that's what this subject kind of was for me. It's like, if I could teach a person something that would make them do better, what would that be? And for me, it's like, you know, for me personally, even this comes into a Black female thing. I am a dork just like you. You know, I can be awkward just like you. And that awkwardness can take a lot of different ways. Like, you know, I may have resting bitch face. It's not because I'm a bitch. And it may not be because I'm resting. It may be because I haven't had my Starbucks today and look what you look like without your coffee in the morning. You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or I may just be like, you know, man, I really want some junk food right now. And I know it's not good for me, just like it's not good for you. And I'm mad because I can't have it. You know, so, you know, if people only knew that, like, we're human just like you, that things would be easier and things would be a little bit more soft as we interact with each other, you know, in this country and the world. And that to give each other grace for that is huge.
Yeah. I think like, kind of piggybacking off of that, one thing that came to mind just now was like one thing that would, you know, if people knew blank, my life would be easier. It's funny because it feels less like about a me thing and more about a them thing.
Yeah.
Is just like when someone has a pre-established idea or story or belief, I like want to get into a better habit of being like, where did you read that? Where did you hear that? Who told you that? Why do you think that? Like, why do you think that's true? Like, who established this truth for you? Because I think so much of the struggle of so like what like between me and my partner right now, like my partner, they have been like out and aware of it. Like they've been aware of who they are since they were like 12 or 14. I'm like 29, right? I'm 31 now, but like 29 is when I was like, oh, okay. and then it's still been a struggle, right? And so for me, it just feels like there's been so much undoing and unlearning and then relearning about who I am and what I like like one big struggle I'm going through is kind of going through the toy box and throwing out things that I thought I liked that I didn't actually like, that I was just like, oh, I just liked this because I thought it would make me happy, kind of thing. And that's been a great experience, but also very like interesting, to say the least. But so like I was saying, between me and part of the conversations that we have a lot, or one of the conversations we have a lot, is just me being like, yeah, I just realized I had this belief for 10 years. And now I gotta not toss it immediately, but just, I gotta Marie Kondo it. Be like, do I need this? Is this okay? Do I want this? No, thank you. And then get rid of it, right? And I wish that was something that everybody did, and not just queer people, not just people of color. I wish that's something that everybody did and just took their beliefs and been like, why do I believe this? Is this serving me? Is this true? Because I think that's one of the most frustrating thing about being like a divergent member of society is people immediately are like, you're wrong. And you're like, am I wrong, or am I not what you're used to?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Paul, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to add to what he was saying, because one thing that came up when he was talking about his partner and him, one thing that popped up for me was sometimes when people live in an area where it's really accepting to be gay, I mean, they come out sooner because it's easier. But, for me, coming from like the New Mexico, Texas area, that's not necessarily the case. And so for people to realize, like, just because we come out that it's easy, no, we're still kind of like he's saying, we're still trying to process everything. We're still trying to figure out, like, yeah, we came out, we did that huge step of coming out. Now we still need to figure out, okay, who are we? Do I still like that? Do I still want to do that? Or am I something totally different? Because like one thing that is huge for me was I started falling in love with drag. But it took me a while to start allowing myself to feel that and accept that feeling.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people don't realize, just speaking specifically to like LGBTQ, is that you do have to come out over and over and over and over and over again. It's not like a one-time deal, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, this is now and it's not like part of the emotional labor is not just that you came out once, it's that you came out and now there's people that have to process that you've come out. You have to come out to more people. You have to be cautious of who you come out to and when. I come from the Midwest. I lived in Kansas. And so like being really cautious of like who you're saying what to. And, obviously being a white person, like I have a lot of, and I also am not like, you look at me and I have a lot of like we've talked about this in different episodes. I have a lot of passing privilege when it comes to LGBTQ as well. Yeah. And so it's like, I have like, that's one of the privileges of like being passing is like, I get to choose who I get to come out to. And I think that that's something that comes up for me when I think of like, what would make it easier for BIPOC or LGBTQ and the intersectionality of those two things, what would make it easier? And I think, for me, what came up in my own thought process was like, well, if people were just like knew that you either don't have a choice in coming out because that's just like how you're presented, or you do have to come out multiple times. Right.
I got one that came up when you were saying all that, which that was great. Thank you for that. Well, one thing I want to say before that is like, I hope people are encouraged from like listening to these. I hope people are encouraged to like ask questions to learn, not ask questions to like judge, because I personally enjoy when someone, like I was hanging out with a straight friend the other night and they were like, we're outside. and they were like, hey, like, can I ask you some questions about your queer experience? And I was like, oh my God, yes. like please. And then they were just like, how was this for you? When did you know? And it was like one of the most connected conversations we've ever had. And now me and this friend are much closer. And I like really appreciate that. And I can imagine that was maybe scary for him, that he was like, I don't want to offend you, but I love that he was like, I want to know, and not like, oh, that's weird to me. Why are you doing it? Because like, it's such like I'm not trying to be political here, but it just feels like such a Republican way of asking things sometimes. It's just like, that's different. I don't understand. And I'm like, you're not even asking to know. You're just asking to, whatever. So I digress. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
Okay, Demi Lovato. All right.
But the thing I was going to say was based on the topic of the episode is the kind of mental, this is stuff I don't know how to word it. The kind of like mental emotional privilege you have of being, I guess, just like, because I don't want to say straight, but I want to say like, oh, this is tough. I don't know, like being closeted isn't a choice necessarily, I guess, in the beginning. Like, it's not like you're not just deciding that you're not like 10 and you're just like, I'm going to be in here. Like, you're just like, that's weird. Oh, interesting. And then one day you're like over here and everyone else is over here. And then you're like, and you don't have a worldview as a child. Your entire worldview is you, your house, your friends, you're like the only people you see, especially in a world without the internet, right? And so it's not, oh, I must belong to a different group or I must be different. It's like, oh, I'm fucked up, like I'm wrong, right? A lot of judgment, a lot of shame in there. It's biologically, we don't want to be wrong. We want to be part of the tribe, right? And so I think that does a lot of, I don't even want to say damage. It's just, that does a lot. It does a lot to a person. And so years later, or however long later, when you're unpacking it and realizing I'm not alone and I'm actually part of this group, there's still a lot in there that you're trying to like clean out. And I think it can be kind of frustrating sometimes when people that haven't had that experience are like, oh, you just gotta be positive and love yourself. And you're like, oh, thanks. Trying, like, it's just really dirty. And they're just like, and I'm like, okay. And I think that can be rough because it's like coming from a good place of like, I care, like I'm here for you. And I'm like, yeah, but like, you're not empathizing necessarily with like just how much, I don't know. Does that land with you all?
It totally lands with me. Yeah. That when you're with what you were describing around like being 10, I call it realizing that you're in the closet. It's like you're kind of, la 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 la. Oh wait, there's something different about me. So it's like it's not like you went into the closet willingly. You just kind of appeared there, and it just kind of came out like, oh, I'm different in this way, and I must hide this. I must conceal this because I don't want anybody to realize how different and therefore how wrong I am. And so, yeah, when you talk about that, the way it resonates for me is that when I chose to come out as bisexual, it wasn't necessarily for them. It was more for me. It was a way for me to tell myself that I am okay. Yeah. And start on this journey of constantly interrupting that voice is telling me that I am not okay because I'm different. And so in a lot of ways, yeah, coming out is not the beginning. Realizing that you're in is the beginning. And then coming out is just that first step on that journey of continuously healing yourself and forgiving yourself for thinking that you were wrong in the first place.
I think it really resonated with what both of you guys said, because like you said, being in the closet wasn't a choice. For me, a lot of it was, I thought there was something really wrong with me. I knew I wasn't like, the other guys. And so it was just more of like, I'm going to hide this, because I'm going to try to be a certain way. Then, like you said, when I came out, it wasn't for them. It was really to just free myself so I could start being who I wanted to be. Because deep down inside, I was like chomping at the bits, like I wanted to do twirls and stuff like that, but I couldn't. Right. But one thing that really popped up for me, and I never really thought about it until right now when you said it, is like coming out is, an amazing experience. But then, what people don't realize is that once we come out, we put ourselves in a situation to be judged and we have to defend ourselves. So it does become, we constantly have to like stand our grounds and be prepared for people that are not going to agree with us or not agree with our lifestyle or put us down for it. And so it does become, it's freeing to come out, but then it is very scary.
Yeah, it's really vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from all of your shares is that going back to the topic is, if people only knew blank, it sounds like if people only knew that I'm just trying to be myself.
Yeah.
If people only knew that I'm just trying to be myself, my life would be easier, happier, go more smoothly.
Right. And that me being myself isn't trying to annoy you. It has nothing to do with you.
Right. My self-expression, right, exactly. It's like my self-expression is my self-expression. Myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not trying to take over the world or, stop certain things from happening. No, I'm just trying to enjoy myself, enjoy my curls, and end of the day.
Your curls are so fabulous.
Let me check diabolical gay agenda. And be fabulous. Oh, okay, cool. Check. You know, is this what y'all are afraid of? Like, what's going on? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a crazy time, like, because it is interesting how people make it about themselves. I mean, and that's just like a whole thing, isn't it? Like, I think this last year I've been like pseudo Buddhist on accident. Like, like I've been reading all this, like, you know, like a lot of self-help and stuff, and it's funny how so much of it goes back to like some kind of Buddhism, and I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. But like one of the ideas is just that, like, you know, when people are mad at you for something, like being able to be like, whoa, you're not even mad at me. Like, this is you. Oh, wow. Are you okay? Like, and that's like gotten me to like, I'm almost like, not every time, but I'm almost able to do that in real time where someone will be upset with me. I'm like, whoa, what's going on with you right now? Because I know this ain't about me.
Right.
It's the way that people are suffering and stuff, and how they just find targets and they make it about them. It's really sad.
And to tie, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please. Yeah.
I'm going to say we're tie it all together because I feel like we've been talking a lot about, like, if people only knew what it was like to be gay or the LGBTQ community, but to tie it as being a person of color,
yeah,
you know, there's a whole another piece that, because each culture is different and each culture is different depending on where you grew up, you know? And so for me, you know, one of the big things that I had to work on was when I came out, like, how can I balance being in the LGBTQ community, but still honor my Latin roots? And what does that look like? And how do I be accepted by them, but still be me? And I'm also part Native American, so also how can I be accepted, you know, in that culture too? And so there's just this whole balancing act that we have to do sometimes.
Playing off that too from like a Black experience is that one thing I'm very, I guess, worried about this year is how there was like all this big talk with the BLM movement. And I'm just like, oh man, if y'all just pretend like this doesn't happen, I'm gonna be so upset. Not trying to perpetuate that idea in my head, but I've definitely even had some moments with some friends or something where I'd be like upset about something and they were just doing the whole like, oh, you know, don't look at it this way, like da da da, like, and I was like, do you remember like a month ago when we had that conversation about like wanting to be heard?
Yeah.
And not having facts spat at me? I was like, I just want to be heard right now. You're doing the thing. And they're like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, this is what it looks like. I don't know. I could keep going on that, but I feel like we've touched on it so much. It's just like so much intergenerational inherited trauma. Me and my mom were talking about this last night, just like how like being Black, a lot of it is like and it's not magic. It's like the ways that we were parented and passed down along the way. It goes back to slavery almost every time. And so there's like, it originates at this like survival level. And so there's a lot of like pain that has been passed down in the ways that we were raised. And it's tough because, you know, being in 2020 now, sometimes somebody will just be like, why are you so afraid of everything? And I'm like,
if you knew.
It was programmed. Like, it was programmed right next to brush my teeth, like at night. Right. Like, you know, it's in there. Like, that's a tough one, but I'm not sure with that. So
no, I want to jump in and just like say that as the sentence, right? It's like, if people only knew that being afraid of my environment and like instilling fear in me in order to survive was just as commonplace as making sure I brushed my teeth every day. Like, if people knew that about me and about my experience, then my life might be easier, because that does elicit empathy, you know, for people. And I think that like the people in your life who want to speak positively to you, right? Like, oh, look on the bright side, right? Which it's like, you know, we all know that it comes from a good place.
Absolutely.
And it's not always helpful, you know? It's like, no, I need you to know that like fear has been instilled in me so that I survive. Like, we brush our teeth every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in a group on Facebook, you know, called for Generation Xers. So, you know, we basically just sit around and shit on all the other generations and stuff. And one, you know, well-meaning white person said, hey, you know, my significant other who is Black says that camping is a white thing. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how white is camping? And I wrote, I'm like, I don't even engage in it because I just won't go and I definitely won't go with other white people, because one of those lessons is that even if you have white friends who you love dearly, there's James Byrd Jr. who got drunk with them and then ended up dragged behind their truck. There's tales of of Black people ending up lynched, in certain areas. There's a lady, I'm forgetting her name, forgive me. She went to a sleepover with 8 of her white girlfriends and did not come back alive. Nobody knows what happened. And so that's the kind of thing that I think about as a Black person, especially as I interact with the world. And, you constantly have that anxiety. Richard Pryor said this in a joke one time where, you might be having a joke with a white person, an argument with a white person. You're making your point. They're making their point. And then all of a sudden they call you N-word. And you're like, oh, fuck, now I got to deal with that too.
Like, oh, there's another thing. Yeah.
And you're constantly on guard for that. You're constantly, it's like you feel it in your chest, like, it's going to happen. And that's the kind of anxiety that is unique, I think, to people of color, but particularly Black people when you're out in the environment, when you're out in the society. And especially if you choose to step outside of what your parents have taught you. So if you do choose to go on that camping trip, you're going to, you're constantly looking for something. And then if something does go wrong, you've got your parents' voice. But I told you about going out there with some white people, told you about doing this, because that is survival. That is life and death type of lessons that you've been learning. So yeah, if people knew that that's the kind of thing that a lot of Black people have to deal with on a daily basis, maybe they would understand why, yeah, I'm not going to that sleepover with you, babe. I love you, but nah,
Mm-hmm. And I think also on top of on this topic of just having to be on guard every day and really having that fear instilled in you. And I think, Paul, I think you can also relate to this. You've talked about being from New Mexico and Texas and being Latino and being gay, also living with that fear as well. Is that I think one thing that I would like just white people to know in general is that if you only knew that people aren't being sensitive, that they're actually living with fear every day. When people are you hear those comments all the time. It's oh, don't be so sensitive, right? Why you gotta be so sensitive? Oh, I'm only trying to say this, right? And it's just no, you said something and I'm already living with fear.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Paul, were you about to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, for me, I'm a very bubbly person and I love to talk. And one thing that always comes up is when I get quiet. People are like, oh, what's wrong? Are you depressed? No, not all the time. A lot of times when I'm out and I'm walking and I get quiet, it's me on guard. I'm thinking in my head, okay, what is that person thinking? Or, am I putting myself in a good situation? I'm watching people's movements because, I want to make sure, because I know that I can't hide my feminine side of me, so I'm okay, who's going to shout something off the street or who's going to do that, And so it's just me being aware of my surroundings.
Mm-hmm. I read a book recently called Secure. It was I talked with Elizabeth about it a little bit. It's really good. I think everybody in the world should not. No, yeah, why not? I think everyone in the world should read it. It's probably my favorite. It's obviously it's aimed at a non-monogamous audience, but it's just good for anyone because it doesn't put it doesn't go with labels as much as spectrum, which I really enjoy. But the thing I kind of pulled from that book a lot that was really cathartic for me was a lot of times in attachment theory, and for those who aren't, I guess, familiar with attachment theory, it's the psychological idea of how we form attachments based on our childhood. And so there's secure attachment, and then there's 3 levels of insecure attachment. But one thing that book kind of opened my eyes to for the first time, that because I'd read a bunch about attachment theory in the past, but when reading this book, without even really saying it directly, the author was kind of secure attachment is a privilege. And I was oh, dang, reading it that was whoa, because she talks about it at this attachment from the self level, from the relationship level, from the community level, and so on and so forth. And there's just a line there where she was it's not just about how you were parented, but if you lived in a world that did not necessarily accept who you were as a person, that's going to alter how you form attachments. And that just really opened my mind a lot to that idea, because I kind of looked at it that way, where I was oh yeah, there was just a lot of my past of me feeling that deep feeling of I am wrong, I am not correct, which I don't identify with that anymore. But there was such a long time of me identifying with that. that it really altered the way that I attach to anybody. And so similar to what you were saying, kind of the being on guard thing, I felt that, like, even with like just being around close friends, I'm just like, oh, is this the moment where I realize that you actually suck, and like, and it's such a exhausting, but it's not chosen. It's a survival mechanism, I suppose.
Yeah, it's such a, and I think like thinking about it now, like one thing that I also feel like us as LGBTQ, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that, there are people out there that are trying to understand. And the only way that they're going to understand is if we are vulnerable enough to share, like we're doing now, but maybe not such on a public setting, but share ourselves with those people so they could truly understand. For the longest time, when people would ask me, I would just shut them off. I'm like, no. And then I shared with some friends and they're like, you never told me that. And I was like, well, yeah. I was like, how would you know that I went through that if I never told you?
Right.
Yeah.
So being vulnerable for them.
Oh, that's so hard.
But you all are doing that right now. And like, that was and Paul, that's a great point. Cause that was like one of the reasons for this, season was to have a resource also, so it's just like, okay, just listen to this. Like if someone is not in a state where they're comfortable being that vulnerable, which arguably being vulnerable is never comfortable. But if you're just not at a place where you can be that vulnerable, that this is a resource, right? Just like, can you just listen to this podcast, please?
Right.
It's just like, this is what I want to say, but I can't say it. Right. And the other thing that I want to say, just from like the feedback that I get as well, is I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is heterosexual, cis, white male. And he was just like, I don't understand. He's like, I've been bullied. I've dealt with anxiety. I've dealt with depression. He's like, I want to understand. He's like, but I don't understand why my experience is being invalidated. And what I said was, it's not that your experience is invalid. Anyone's experience is valid because that is your experience. It's like, so this is not about invalidating your experience. This is about, there are people in the world who have dealt with everything that you've dealt with. They've dealt with being bullied. They've dealt with anxiety. They've dealt with depression. They've dealt with literally every single thing that you have dealt with. And also tack on the fact that they are Black, tack on the fact that they are Latino, tack on the fact that they are LGBTQ. They have an entire another level or levels to deal with on top of your experience.
Yep.
And he was just like, oh, that's a lot. I was just like,
I was gonna say, to add to that, like one thing that sometimes people don't realize, like anybody coming out is, a lot, but for me, when I came out, then I have to deal with my family and their fear of what will happen to me because I'm coming out. Not just because I'm coming out, but now I'm coming out as a Latino, so there's that double whammy from my family because they understand that I already have it tough because I'm a person of color, but now I'm going to have it even more tough because I'm gay. And I'm sure it's the same for other cultures. And so it's just, we're not invalidating anybody's experience. It's just ours is different. Just like mine's different from other cultures.
And I want to build on that as well, because, I have those conversations as well with, my white cishet friends. And it's not that they're being invalidated, but they are not being centered. And that's the difference, I think. It's not that that nobody validates their feelings or anything or their experiences. It's just that your experience is always validated. It's out there. There are movies made about it. There are songs written about it. That sort of thing, and it's out there. It's just that when people talk about this particular thing, it doesn't have to be about you at this time because there is so much out there about you. And so it's one of those things where it's like, maybe it feels like it's invalidating because it's not speaking directly to you. But, that's where I would challenge them to say, okay, look at your environment, as a Black bisexual Buddhist woman, how much of that is about me? And, point me to it because I totally want to be part of that, and that's the difficulty when we do articulate our points of view. it's all like, oh, you're trying to throw that up in my face, or you're trying to diminish me by advocating for yourself. That's hard to kind of get through because, I'm a fighter. The first thing I'm like, screw you, that sort of thing. But at the same time, what I want to do is I want to challenge myself to say, okay, just like Brian was saying, where is that coming from? How can I be Buddhist and say, what led you to that point of view? What led you to that worldview that you think that what I just said was an affront against you? And how can I understand that so that I can help you reshape or reform the way that you think about this in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, it's good. I was just saying it's interesting how self-centered we can all get sometimes and just be like, oh, this thing's about me. And it's like, nah, it's not, like, not about you. Yeah. I was going to say one more thing based off of what Paul was saying about the family fear part is it's a little on the heavier side. The last conversation I ever had with my uncle, he ended up passing away about a month later. Really happy that in that conversation, I came out to him. And it was great, but there was so much fear from him where he was just like, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make like a post about it. And he's like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. And I was like, why? And he's just like, cause he's like, people they don't need to know. Like, you don't. Yeah. And I was like, why don't, like, I was like, where's this coming from? Like, what's going on? Cause we have like a very like frank relationship and I really appreciate that. And like, he was just like, what about like your job? Like you'll lose your job and like, what if this doesn't happen? And I was just like, and I like owned the shit out of like the next thing I said where I was just like, what job? Like, well, cause I'm not working much right now. It's the corona, right? I was just like, what job? What career? And I was like, I'm tired. I was like, I'm tired of people like of altering who I am so people like me and hire me. Like, I'm like, fuck that. Like, I'm so tired of that. Like, I don't want to be that person anymore. Like, I don't want to do that. And like, and I could just hear in his voice, there was all this, it wasn't like shame, it was fear. Like he was afraid for me. And that was just like, it made me so upset, not at him, but like for him, where like he had to live in this world of like, like put on this cape and like cloak to pretend who I am so people will like me, so I'll have a chance. And like that's what I heard in that. What I heard is like, I've had to alter who I am to make it. And it wasn't even working for him. Like he was unemployed because of Corona and whatever. And I just feel like life kicked him in the ass. And the whole time he was just trying to like be something else that people wanted. Like I saw that in him. Is like he was creative, he was funny, he was like he wanted to be a stand-up comedian, he wanted to be a breakdancer, like all of these things. But then in his 50s, he was just like some kind of advertising person, which is fine. I'm not insulting anybody that does that, but like I could see the closeted version of him.
Yeah.
And so when I was like, I can't be in here anymore. He was like, but what if they like? He was so afraid of that. Like, don't leave. But by the end of the conversation, he was like, I'm proud of you. Like, that's awesome. Do that. And that was like the last thing he ever said to me. No, it almost feels like got to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's such a big thing because like when you were talking about that, I was like thinking, how many things did I not pursue? Because I was afraid of what people were going to think. Growing up, I wanted to be a male cheerleader. And I didn't do it because I was afraid of, people jumping me and attacking me for it. I wanted to be a dancer, but I was afraid of, what people would say. And I was just, oh my gosh. And I think that's one thing that, now, especially after coming out, I'm like, I don't want to hide no more. Like, I don't want to let any more of my dreams go past me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that part of it is like, your own choice, right? Your own choice to be like, I'm going to do it anyway. Right. Mm-hmm. But again, sticking to like this topic, it's like, if people only knew that their judgments were stifling people's lives, right? Like if people only knew that their I don't know. I don't have another word to say other than judgment. Like, we're actually taking away from people's happiness.
And they're acting on that judgment, It's like, you can have an opinion, but you don't have to share it, boo-boo. Like, you can have an opinion, but you don't have to act on it, It's like, you cannot like me, but you can totally, you have the whole right to shut up, and not, and on top of that, not threaten people's livelihoods, people's lives, people's mental well-being, because of something that they're doing with themselves. And so, and that's what makes it so sad. Like, if people only knew how much, when you act on something that you believe that is true for you but may not be true for someone else, how much that wreaks havoc on them, and how much additional energy and time and work they have to do to recover from that wound. That's, and that's huge, So that's not to say that it won't ever happen. I think that's unrealistic to say that we won't ever hurt each other, but to be mindful of that. Like, hey, something that I will say could possibly, shape this person for a lifetime. Paul did not become a male cheerleader because somebody said something bad about male cheerleaders. It's that kind of thing, when we just need to be more mindful about how we interact in the world, how we are in the world. And a lot of times people just aren't.
Yeah. And I think one thing I'm trying to do is like there might be 20 people that were like, but like, even if there's one that's like, wow, trying to focus on that one.
Yeah.
And I think, it's not just judgment. It's like, if people really knew how related they were to the people around them, and realizing that their words matter.
Yep.
Because they may not be saying, something out of a place to be mean, but when those people hear those words, it matters to them. And I think, I had an incident the other day where I was with someone and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to work today. And then I caught myself. I was like, oh, he doesn't have a job right now because of COVID.
Right.
And then, I had the opportunity to like go back to that person and apologize. But it was only because I was related to him as what he's going through. And I was able to catch that my words could have impacted him.
Yeah.
And going back and cleaning that up.
Yeah. And it really all like ties in together. Right. It's just like, if we, as people who are receiving those like hurtful statements, realize, as what, all of us have spoken to, Brian brought it up first, is like that it comes from a place of either like fear or concern, or, or it's something that's going on with them. Right. Where it's just like, hey, like, how are you? Are you okay? You good? And like not taking people's words so personally. So like, from one vantage point, it's like, okay, there's like an opportunity to like not take words so personally, because, it's not necessarily about, their words are also not about you.
Right.
And it's also from the person who's speaking, right? From the person who's saying those words, where it's like, hey, your words have power.
Right.
What you're saying to someone has an impact. Whether it doesn't matter if you like it like that or not. What you're saying has an impact on another person or people.
Yeah.
And I think it's even more important now with social media, because people forget, all the time people will go and post something on social media, and then people get mad and they're like, oh, I didn't realize. Well, that's where we have to really be careful with what we're actually posting and putting out there, because it does, there is an impact and we have to be responsible for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of throwaway words is so funny to me. Like, when you think about it, it's like, oh, I just said this thing. And like, I lived with somebody once who was just like jokes all the time. And to the point where I was like, stop. And he's like, oh, I'm just telling a joke. I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, it's not funny. It's not funny. Like, it's a bad joke. Like, that's the point. So it's not funny, but then you're upset no one's laughing.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? Like, you're just speaking to be heard. Okay, there are more authentic ways to be heard. Like, tell me how you're doing. Tell me about your day. Tell me about how's your mama. Like, and I feel like social media is just that, where everyone's just throwing words out because they're like, give me attention. I'm like, be careful what you want attention on, because you'll get it. And it could be powerful, and it could be life-changing, or
that.
or like, and I just think that's something I want people to wake up to, is like, you can be such a powerful effect on the world around you. And it's not impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, first of all, I love where this whole conversation has gone. You all are amazing. And yeah, I think just to summarize, it's just your words have power. You have power. And I think that that's something that people just aren't responsible for.
Right.
Is that you, like you listener, you Jamie, you Brian, you Paul, me Elizabeth, we all have power.
Yeah.
You know, and people just aren't responsible for how much power that they have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we could dissect that till kingdom come, but you know, it's what I'm getting out of this episode. I would love to just go around and say, like, okay, what's the takeaway? What's the action? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, what my takeaway is like being responsible for the power that, like, recognizing and being responsible for the power that you do have, because you do, every single one of us, and being responsible for that. And then the action for me is listening to others and listening to yourself, like, first and foremost. Like, am I saying this out of fear? Am I saying this out of concern? Is there a better way? Like, if my commitment is, you know, concern because I love this person, is there a way that I can say this that has the other person that I'm speaking to be self-expressed instead of distilled? Right.
Right.
Anyway, so, all right, Jamie, would you like to go next?
Sure. My takeaway is that, you know, if people only knew that what we are doing is primarily to live our lives and to be healthy mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to be okay with ourselves, then it would make things a lot easier. You know, I think we're all just trying to navigate this world and navigate our lives in a way where it works for us. And if you can give yourself that grace, then you can give other people that grace. And so be gentle with ourselves, be gentle with other people, you know, and just kind of understand that we're all trying to figure it out. As Brian said, none of us know what we're doing. So we're all doing our best. And just everybody realize that.
Yeah.
And with that, I'll pass the mic to Brian.
Thanks. I think my takeaway is what we say as power. We also have the ability to, like, I don't know.
This could also be like what you want other people to take away. It doesn't have to be your takeaway.
Yeah,
right?
what I want other people to take away is that, like, your words have power. And if someone finds themselves, like, coming from a place of, like, I'm saying this because no one cares about me, it's like, man, everyone would care about you if you cared about other people harder. Like, be the change you want to be in the world, and you'll be surprised by the amount of love you'll get back, I guess. But also, like, people are just trying to live their lives. It's not about you.
Right.
And they would love to tell you why if you ask them authentically.
Yeah.
So maybe.
For me, I think one of the biggest takeaways, if, you know, for people out there to get, is to let go of anything you thought you know and just be a space of learning and just asking questions, figuring out who the people around you, get related to them. That way, because, like, you know, everybody said your words matter.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we're all creators. And, you know, for us in the LGBTQ community, we're just trying to be our authentic selves, which will allow us to be happy and loving and giving love out there in the world. So that's what I would love for people to get.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Beautiful. That's an amazing place to end. Thanks for ending us on that note, Paul.
You're welcome.
Ever fabulous. Oh my gosh, I love you all. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your thoughtful words. Thank you for, I'm gonna go yoga on you for a second. Thank you for your thoughtful words. Thank you for your kind heart. Thank you for your compassion for yourself and others. And thank you for the willingness to be vulnerable in the spirit of growth and education and knowledge and having us be connected. So thank you. I really appreciate you all being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Platform. Love you guys.
Love.